because, like I said, knowing how to think is far more important than knowing what to think. And today we're still adopting an educational system that was drafted during the Industrial Revolution. So we have a system that's over 150 years old, and we're still using it nowadays. And the purpose of that initial education system was to put people in line and to kind of prepare them for the workspace, prepare them for 5 to 9. You know, when you hear the bell, you go to lunch, you come back, and you start working again. And times have changed. You know, now we have jobs that are not as manual and structured as we needed during the Industrial Revolution. So surely the education should change to match that, but I'm afraid it hasn't. And essentially, I kind of, my vision is to adopt this problem-solving based learning. So learning that forces students to solve problems as opposed to just regurgitating information. So what I mean by that is a lot of our subjects are, well, actually all of our subjects are taught in complete isolation. So they're taught as maths is separate from English, is separate from science, from geography, etc. And there's no there's no connection between the subjects being taught. I believe that these subjects need to be taught in such a way that they link and students can see the connections between the subjects. So you can see how maths integrates with physics, integrates with geography, and how geography links to history and so forth. And so my proposal is this problem-solving based learning where students are tasked with solving problems, and by solving those problems, are you exposed to maths, English, history, business science, biology, and so forth. That way, when you're learning those subjects, there's some context associated with it. And having context associated with your subjects makes them retain within students much longer.
So much easier.
And nowadays, most students, especially when I was in matric, they were saying, oh no, ma'am, I don't want to learn this because I don't see how it's going to be useful in life, or I'm never going to use it again. But if you show students how these topics actually apply to the real world, then you can really change the way people think. And instead of, and essentially teaching them how to think as opposed to what to think. And where 3D printing fits in this whole picture is that I think 3D printing can be used as a tool to enable this problem-solving based learning. So as an example, you can task students with, say, the water crisis in Cape Town, like last year. So you could tell them, come up with a solution to this process. So to do that, you'd have to learn about the history of Cape Town, the geography of Cape Town, where there are water reserves, so forth. Thereafter, you have to do maybe some calculations to see the rate of flow. And from there, you can actually design a product. You know, how can you address this? So you could design, I don't know, a water tap system that reduces your water consumption. To do that, you have to go through a design thinking process, and you have to iterate. You encounter issues along the way, but you resolve those issues. That's a huge part of learning, is making mistakes and learning from them. Nowadays, when you make a mistake, you're condemned for it, and you know you're put in line and said, no, that's right, you don't do it like that. Whereas if you adopt this process, you acknowledge your mistake. You say, yes, it doesn't work, but why? How can I fix it? How can I change it? So now you're engaging with the content, you know. And then you develop that product in school. Then you apply business sciences to that. How do you market it? How do you sell it? And at the end of the day, you've come up with this product that you can then 3D print. You can hold in your hands, and all that knowledge that you've learned can now be related to something you can physically hold. And, you know, a lot of students are visual learners. It's going to stick much longer if they actually have something to show for it at the end of the day. That's essentially the kind of learning that I think we should start adopting. I mean, it's a radical shift from our current system. But because most students leave school uninspired nowadays and unaware of the technologies and opportunities out there, we need to start integrating this tech and this form of learning into schools, so that students can leave school aware of what's happening outside there. Even at Saints, so we went to an incredibly privileged school, even there, most students have never heard of 3D printing. And so if not even your top tier schools are exposing students to this technology, how do you expect the more underserviced schools to get access to this as well? And now moving into the fourth industrial revolution, these are skills and knowledge that students will have to have if they want to survive in this new global narrative. And that's just something that school is letting a lot of students down. They just leave unmotivated and unaware. So you need to start introducing this slowly but surely to equip students with the skills to navigate this complex world that we're entering.
Yeah, I think what's
like what's interesting for me is there's a really beautiful quote. I can't remember exactly who it's by. It's someone who works at Amazon. And what he says is that we need to stop asking students what they want to be when they're older, and we have to start asking students what problems they want to solve. And as soon as we shift the direction of education from this space where it's about being this and having the skills to do this, it's about what change do you want to make in the world and what tools do you need to have in order to actualize that change. And exactly. So what you're saying with is something that I 120% agree with. Like, I think if schools can move in a direction like that, we're going to be looking at a completely different world in 100 years' time.
I think one of the biggest problems at the moment, so just this is going back a little bit, but we were mentioning how students don't really feel like stuff is going to apply to their lives out of school because of the way it's taught. I think what's even worse than that is students thinking that because it's not examinable, it's not important. And it's because we're tied into this rote learning system and it's exactly that industrial production line system that's going on there. And I think that particularly you mentioned higher literacy rates. With one of the other industrial revolutions like the combustion engine, the amount of job opportunity that created just from becoming popularized with more cars becoming mainstream, mechanics and technicians, and that the avenues of job creation would just endless. So I reckon that with the fourth industrial revolution, a similar thing is bound to happen.
Yeah, and also touching on what Jason mentioned is that, and we've probably heard this a lot, is that most students, the jobs they're preparing for don't even exist yet. So how do you equip students to navigate that landscape? It's by giving them skills of problem solving and being able to adapt and change, because they're going to be studying and then they're going to end up working at a job that doesn't even exist. That's why they need to have these problem-solving skills. And as you mentioned, those aren't necessarily tested by writing exams, but rather by actually engaging, producing stuff, working with your peers and so forth. It's about developing that ability to actually think. And if you have that skill, and that's a skill that physics taught me, is to think, then you can apply that to any industry, right? And to any job that appears in the future. And that is crucial. And that's where schools are failing us. They're not teaching us how to think. They're teaching us what to think. And they're not teaching us how to learn. That's a bit ironic, because you go to school, you think you'd learn how to learn, but you don't actually. And I experienced this by entering university. There suddenly you're exposed to much harder content, and there you don't have people that are babysitting you and pushing you along the way. And it was then that I realized school doesn't really equip you with the tools to actually learn new things. It teaches you how to regurgitate and take in information, but not how to actually learn, and that's just something that we need to promote in schools through problem-solving based learning. Well, at least that's kind of my proposal.
Yeah,